Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm Atlanta Area Council welcome to our keynote speaker, Mr. Ralph de la Vega.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. You know, it's a tremendous honor to be able to address this distinguished audience today. I look across this room, what an incredible crowd, and what an incredible story from Arnold. You know, you are the reason why we support the Boy Scouts and why we want to have 1 million Arnolds in this country. So thank you to you and your mom for what you do. You know, for more than 100 years, the Boy Scouts have formed the moral character of generations of American boys. The same characters and the same values that Arnold spoke so eloquently about. But before we get into those values, I want to speak about the American principles. Because it is the word American boys that I want to emphasize. The American principle that all men are created equal, and they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, are the values that have made this great country of ours great over so many years. And a country which is a beacon, an absolute beacon to immigrants throughout the world that want to come here because of the values that our society represents. And values that have inspired so many immigrants, like my parents, to take a risk and to, in fact, risk it all just so that they could give their children a chance for a future to live in a country like ours. So let me tell you a little bit about my story. I was born in Cuba, and after the revolution in the 1950s, my family lived in a constant state of fear and uncertainty and anxiety. The freedom we had known was gone and was replaced with intimidation and the confiscation of property. You could be arrested for just a suspicion of wrongdoing, and you certainly wouldn't get a trial by jury of your peers. Food distribution was taken over by the government, so my father's business, which was food distribution, was gone. So my parents made the difficult decision to leave the country, guided again by that beacon of hope, freedom, and opportunity that is the United States of America. But before you could leave Cuba in those days, you had to agree to leave every material possession behind. Your home, your savings account, and every material possession. You could not take anything with you, essentially the clothes on your back. And as tough as it was for my parents to make that decision, an even more difficult decision awaited us as the family was prepared to fly out of the Havana airport when I was 10 years old. You see, when we got to the Havana airport and the militiaman checked our exit papers, he looked at him and said 5 words that changed my life and my family's life forever. 5 words that changed my life and my family's life forever. And those words were, only the boy can go. The airplane was running, the people were at the gate, and the family had to make a decision. Do we all stay behind, or do we send Ralph ahead? Unbelievably, my father started making phone calls and decided to send me ahead. We didn't have any family in the U.S., but he had some friends, and he told me, Ralph, don't worry about it. It's going to be like a sleepover. We're going to be reunited in a few days. And I got on that airplane and said goodbye to my parents, and I would not see them again in 4 years. So I found myself in a new country with a new family that were recent immigrants, new language, new customs, without any money, and heck, at the time, I didn't even like American food. The first food that I got when I got to the U.S. was a cold glass of milk and a peanut and butter and jelly sandwich. And in Cuba, we never drank milk cold. It was always warm with chocolate and sugar. And in Cuba, we had sandwiches that had pork and ham in them, you know? So I got here and I go, this is a great country, but where's the meat, you know? So I I don't like peanut butter still, but I drink lots of milk. Those early days without my parents were so difficult that everything else in my life has been relatively easy. So when people ask me how tough it was to merge Singular Wireless and AT&T Wireless, which required a 41 billion all-cash transaction, the largest cash merger in U.S. history at the time, I tell them that's relatively easy. You know, hard is leaving your country, your family, your language, your customs, and starting over. But you know what? The human spirit is incredibly resilient. And even though those early days were very difficult for me, I realized that I landed in the greatest country in the world, the US of A. And I had a second family, my second family, that took me in and watched me for those 4 years like if I was their son. So I tell people that it has to be a great country where a 10-year-old boy can set foot on its shores without his parents, not knowing the language, not knowing the culture, without any money, and is speaking to you today as the CEO of AT&T Mobile and Business Solutions, an organization with 70,000 employees, 118 million wireless customers, serving more than 4,000 businesses in over 100 countries, and generating $100 billion of revenue every year. It has to be a great country. It has to be a great country, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm really living proof that the American dream is still very much alive. But as I said, getting here wasn't easy. In fact, I almost didn't make it. My dream was to become an engineer, and I almost never became an engineer. You see, back in high school, when I told my high school counselor that I wanted to become an engineer, he looked at my records, he looked at my financial situation, and he recommended that I become a mechanic instead. And you know what? I listened to him. I didn't know anything else. So I actually stopped going to regular high school classes and started to get enrolled to be a mechanic. But then my grandmother, my abuela, my scoutmaster, arrived from Cuba. My grandmother was a really strong Cuban woman. She was the mother to 7 children. She was a poet and a pretty spunky gal. So when I told her that I was studying to be a mechanic, but I really wanted to be an engineer, I'm not going to translate what she said for you. But it generally made something like, Ralph, what you're saying doesn't make any sense. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a mechanic. It's just that my dream was to become an engineer, and she spotted that there was something wrong right away. And then she gave me a bit of advice that I do want to translate for you that has changed my life. And she said, Ralph, don't let anyone put limitations on what you can achieve. If you want to be an engineer, you can become an engineer. You know, I listened to my grandma, and I did a Control-Alt-Delete on that counselor's advice, and the rest is history. So I'm addressing you here today first because my parents took a huge risk. They sacrificed everything in their lives to make it better for me and my sister. And second, because of that huge intervention of my grandmother, my scoutmaster, at a critical time in my life, not unlike the advice that Arnold got from his scoutmaster. And that's what I love about the Boy Scouts, because scoutmasters do it all the time. They help young boys so they can stay on the right track to achieve their dreams. And that's why I'm passionate about helping the Boy Scouts. You know, for more than 100 years, the Boy Scouts have been helping generations of boys to grow up into productive men. But folks, we're living in a different America today. And I want to talk about 3 huge megatrends, huge demographic changes that are going to significantly impact our nation and the Boy Scouts. And we can either view these things as challenges, or we can view them as possibly the greatest opportunity that the Boy Scouts have ever had to make an impact on our communities and in our nation. The first change has to do with the growth of minorities in this country. Between 2040 and 2050, America will become a majority-minority country. Between 2040 and 2050, America will become a majority-minority country. And if you look at not just the total age, but if you look at the young demographics, some people say that'll happen at the younger ages. The ages of our Cub Scouts and our Boy Scouts will happen before this decade is out. Many of these young men and women have never been exposed to the Boy Scouts. And future Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts are more likely to come from these segments than any other segments. So we need to reach out to these families and connect them and familiarize them with all the benefits of scouting so they can trust us to teach their boys the values of leadership and what it means to be a great American. The second demographic change that I want to talk to you about is the impact of the new millennial generation. Millennials are people born between 1980 and 1995, so they're typically aged 19 to 35. The millennials are 80 million strong and represent the largest generation in our country's history. The largest generations. So what are these millennials like? Well, let me give you some facts. They love to take selfies. We make that happen. Yes, we do. They, on the average, have 250 friends on Facebook, and they're likely to sport a tattoo. Those kind of things set them apart, but they really think different, they act different, they have different belief sets. But here's what it means to us. Remember the ages of these folks that I gave you, 19 to 35. These are the ages of the parents for our prospective Cub Scouts. These are the parents for our prospective Cub Scouts. If we're going to grow, if we're going to be flourishing, if we're going to be significant, we have to be able to connect with them in order to be able to grow the next generation of Boy Scouts. Finally, the third demographic change is that the definition of the family is changing dramatically. Marriage has declined among all groups in the country. If you go back to 1960, almost 60% of adults 18 to 29 were married. 60%, almost 60%. Today, that's down to 20. That's a huge change. And the definition of a family today is no longer a mom, a dad, and a child. In fact, 29% of children are born to single mothers. 53% of Hispanic births are to single mothers. And 72% of African American births are to single mothers. Now let me ask you a question, and I think Arnold has already answered this for you. Which organization in the world is best positioned to help those young boys being born to single mothers? Which organization in the world has the capability to have a scoutmaster reach out to those young boys? I'd say it's us. I'd say it's the Boy Scouts. What do you say? You know, I think with the support of the people in this room, the people that are helping us with their funds, the staff, the volunteers, I think the Boy Scouts can reach these young people and instill in them the values that are going to make them successful in life. Here's why I think that works. I mentioned several times that for 100 years, the Boy Scouts have built the character of a generation of American boys. 11 of those boys later walked on the moon. By the way, there's only 12 men that have ever sat on the moon. 11 of them have been Boy Scouts. Hundreds of Boy Scouts have served in Congress. Thousands have defended our freedom. Millions of them became loyal husbands, helpful teachers, fair judges, cheerful coaches, brave soldiers, great fathers, and exemplary Eagle Scouts, some of them overcoming incredible odds in the process, like Arnold Andre, which is just, it doesn't get any better than that. You know, the thing that I love about the Scouts, though, is there are millions of Arnolds and Johns and Jose's who may never reach the moon, but who, with hard work and scouting, are more likely to reach their dreams. And I'd say in today's time, and with the issues that we're facing, more children and youth than ever need our guidance. More minority children and youth can benefit from a scouting experience. More kids at risk than ever need someone to guide them to the right path. And your support is needed more than ever. Ladies and gentlemen, what you do matters, whether by helping to raise funds at events like this or actually being part of the Scout movement, either by being part of the staff or the volunteers. What you do really, really matters. It matters to our young people. It matters to their families. It matters to their communities. It matters to our nation. And deep inside, I know it matters to you by knowing you're helping preserve the American values that have made this nation great. I believe that President Theodore Roosevelt said it best when he said, Americanism is not a matter of creed or birthplace or descent. The best American, he said, has in him the American spirit and the American soul. And with your presence and support here, you're helping to foster that great American spirit and American soul in future generations. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ralph, I want to thank you again for just truly an inspiring story, and thank you so much for being here today and for the leadership that you not only provide to the Boy Scouts, but also the leadership you provide us both here in the Atlanta community and also in the many other communities that you serve from your role with AT&T. And to thank you for that, we're going to name a campership in your honor that's going to be able to provide a young man who otherwise would not have the opportunity to go. He will now be able to go. And we want to thank you so much, Ralph, for everything you do.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you very
being
much.
here. Thank you.